Okay, so the next thing I'd like to do is I mentioned that in this portion of our discussion of I/O management, we're done talking about how to get things in and out of our Java applications, but now we're talking about what are the entities that can actually represent those things that provide data into and out to those streams, right? And so one of the most common forms entities that we use to populate our input and output streams or files. So let's just take a quick look on how we can create a file. Let's have a presentation of all the methods for creating a file using Java. So we'll have an introduction to this video. We'll cover some naming conventions for creating a file in Java. We'll talk about the ways to create a file in Java. There are 3 ways, and we'll discuss those 3 ways. So in this lecture, we'll learn how to create a file in Java easily using the file class. The file class is used to create a file in Java. And so the file class, again, belongs in java.io. File can perform various operations related to file handling, such as creating, opening, closing, and deleting files. But that's all it does, is it handles the files themselves. It doesn't cover the role of reading and writing files. That's what reader and writer is for. That's what the input stream and output stream are for. We can also get the name and size of the file using the file class. So in terms of naming conventions, there are some naming conventions that we must follow while creating a file in Java. So these naming conventions are: 1, that the file name should be unique and of a string type. 2, we can divide the file name into 2 parts, typically the name and then its extension. So for instance, I have my file.text. Typically, I want to do this though. txt is usually what we do. Or my file.dat. And so typically I'll use dat for binary files to indicate, hey, this isn't human readable, this is data, versus txt to represent, oh, this came from a character stream. Sometimes you'll see .bin as well for binary. Before using any file, we should know its purpose, right? What our permissions are for it, whether we can write into it, read into it, or both those things. Some files are even executable, but in Java, we're usually just reading or writing to them. And then the data type of file operations can either be bytes or characters. So in Java, there are 3 ways to create a file. Right? We can either use the file, there's a static method in File.createNewMethod. We can use the FileOutputStream class, which we've already looked at before. Or we can use the file class to create files. So we can either create file or create new file, or use a FileOutputStream. So looking at the FileCreateNewFile method, the file class is a powerful class that provides a static method named createNewFile to create an empty file automatically. So this method belongs to the java.io package, again, because it's part of file. The general signature of the method is it returns back a Boolean, it's publicly available, it's create new. So this method does not take any arguments. It creates a new file automatically, an empty file. It returns true if it was successful, false if it already exists. So it won't override a file if that file is already there. So let's go ahead and look at some sample code. Let's actually try to create a Java program to create a new empty text file. And again, this simple source code, but we're going to go into IntelliJ to our create file tester 1. Okay, so let's open up that source code, and I'm going to close these older applications. So here I'm going to import a file. I'm going to import IO exception, both from package.java.io. I'm going to create a new class, create file tester, going to create a main method. And so here I'm going to create a file object, right? Giving this file object, giving the path name of the file object I want. Then I'm going to create a Boolean result here to record the results. I'm going to do the try catch block. I'm going to try to create a new file. with that. So I'm going to use file and I'm going to say create new file. And so that file should not already exist. Let me see. Does file 1 exist? And so if it does, well, let's try to run this. And here we can see, oh, the file already exists at that location. It's right there, right? I'm going to delete it. Let's go ahead and delete that. And yeah, do that refactor. Okay, so now when I run it, we're going to say that we get a file created at location. So it created that file and see, we can see file1.txt has now been created. So here we can check the results. So if we check to see, we're going to try to create that new file. If we successfully did it, we print out file created at location, which is what we did. If it doesn't create a new file because it already exists, it's going to say that that file already exists. That's what we're doing with that Boolean value. After we get back from create new file. Excellent. And then we're reporting the path using the get canonical path. Okay, so there's another mechanism to, yeah, this is just our output here, where after our first execution, it's going to show file created. Our second execution, it'll then show it's already created. Okay, so we can also create a file using the file output stream. So recall that the file output stream is a concrete subclass in Java, and it extends the output stream and it writes data to a file descriptor object. And it was added all the way back in Java 1. And so FileOutputStream class is present in the Java.io package, and it stores data as individual bytes. Now remember that we build on top of that things like writers, where we can also use it as a character. But at the end of the day, whether it's however it is, we're fundamentally writing bytes to our files. So the FileOutputStream class provides a constructor to create a text file. So the general signature looks like this, and we've seen this before. And then recall that with the FileOutputStream, we can give it a name for the file and then a second parameter on whether we want to append to that file or not. If that's set to false, or if we use the default, then you would just structurally overwrite to that path each time, as opposed to adding new content. So let's look at the FileOutputStream. We've seen these before, but we'll have examples. We'll have examples in this video as well. So here we'll import our file output stream. We'll import a scanner object. Here we'll go ahead and import our IO exception. I'll create a new class, createFileTester. I'll create a main method. It's going to throw the IO exception. Here I'm going to create a scanner that's going to scan the system input, the keyboard. Here I'm going to create a path for where this file is going to go. So file2.txt. Then I'm going to create a new file output stream given the path and set append to true. So what I'm going to do here is let's delete file2 so that we start from scratch. There's my delete. There we go. Let's delete that. So file2 doesn't exist. So there's do that refactor. So file2 doesn't exist. So here we're going to create that file. Then we're going to prompt the user, hey, enter your file content. We're going to pull that content from the scanner. Then we're going to get that content as bytes to the array, and then we're going to write into our file output stream. Then we're going to close our stream, and we're going to say, hey, we saved that file successfully if no exceptions occur, into the console. So let's go ahead and run this, enter your content. Now notice as soon as I do this, let me put hello world, and notice the file doesn't exist until after this close method. So notice what's going to happen here. I'm going to hit enter. And now when it's done, it's going to show that the file saved successfully. I now have a file2.txt. And if I open it up, it says hello world. And since that's set to append true, if I run that again, and I put this is another line, I'm going to hit that. And now if I go here, I can see it appended there. Perfect. Yeah, that's the source code we just looked at, and that's the output. Okay, and the third way that we can go ahead and create a file is similar to the first way we looked at. Instead of create new file, we can call just create file method. So the create file method is a static method of file class, which belongs in the java.nio, not java.io, java.nio.file.files package. And it creates a new and empty file. It fails if the file already exists. So the other one returns true or false. This one will return back a path. So the main advantage of using this method is that we don't need to close the resources while using this method. So this method returns the file. It takes two parameters, a path object, and a file attribute object. And this one's optional. This one's required. And so if a file of that name already exists, the method will throw a file already exists exception. So we'll take a quick example of this, a very small code. Just actually jump over to here. And what I'll do is I'll delete this. And let's open up our createFile tester 3. And so here I will import IO exception. I will import from the NIO, the new input output package, the files class, which is from inside of a package called file. I'll also import the path class and the paths class. Well, path is an interface. Paths is a class built off of the interface. Here I'll create my tester class, my example class, create file tester 3, create a main method. Here I'm going to call paths to get this path, to get this string as a path object. So paths.get allows me to build path instances using a string. So I'm passing this string and it's going to return back to me a path object. Once I have that path object, I can pass it to the files static method create file. And with that path object, it will now create that file and return back the path to that file. And then I can print that out. I'll just go ahead and do a print out of that. And I'll do this in try catch block. And so if an exception occurs, I'll try to catch that exception. Let's go ahead and run this. And here, let's see, we have, I guess it already looks like I'm getting my file already exists exception. So I must have deleted, I thought I deleted the file. Maybe I didn't. Let's delete this file. Okay, that file is deleted. So now let's rerun that again. Okay, there. Now we see that the file was created successfully at that location, and there's file 3. And we already saw what it looks like if we try to rerun and that file exists, right? When we try to rerun, it's going to throw the exception. Say, hey, that file already exists. Excellent. And so those are just different ways that we can create files. One of those we've seen before, 2 of those we learned about just now. And so I think we'll have some quick presentations probably next time, just looking at all the different ways that we can both read and write files so that we have a complete understanding of file processing and file management in Java. And then we'll move on to serialization. Excellent. That seems to be the path. And then once we do serialization, we can move on. We'll be done with Unit 3. Because what it is there's 3 major streams that we really care about. It's the byte streams, the character streams, and object streams. And so we still have to examine object streams. So does anyone have any questions?